What's next? Whatever it is, it's coming at us faster every day from every corner of the globe. What's next isn't where it used to be. It's everywhere else, and it's relentless. Some companies think what's next only happens through R&D or acquisitions. For them, what's next might be fatal. The most innovative companies are partnering with startups to do more with less, to hack problems, and to unlock growth. The most innovative companies turn to VentureFuel to solve their corporate challenges with innovative solutions. Our global innovation network includes over 500 leading venture capitalists, universities, accelerators, and angel investors. Heck, even our scouts have scouts, which is why at any given time, we have eyes on up to 2 million vetted startups around the world. But you don't care about 2 million startups. You care about the ones that can solve your problem, which is why we don't give you lists. We deliver custom vetted solutions. So whether you want to transform innovation across your company, or solve an immediate challenge with tangible results, or simply discover what's possible, VentureFuel helps you inject innovation to stay ahead of the pace of change. What's next? What's next is now.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Fred Schonenberg. I'm the founder of VentureFuel. I couldn't be more excited for you all to be here today to celebrate our Venture and Visionary of the Year. This is the Hall of Fame for innovators. It is voted on and elected by their peers, so it's a really special honor, and we're really excited to talk about both their careers, where they've come from, where they're going, as well as innovation, entrepreneurship, and the transformative work that they are both doing, as well as touch on how corporates and startups might be able to work together to commercialize and ignite change. So before we get into this, I want to embarrass our two guests today a little bit with some background. Marty is the VP of Business Development at Stanley Black Decker, which I think almost all of you will know. It's the world's largest tools and storage company. And Michael is the CTO and co-founder of Inworld. Inworld is the leading developer platform using AI to build interactive multimodal characters. So Marty has over 3 decades of experience as a corporate innovator, having spent the last 6 or so working with startups, academia, venture capital, and global corporates to drive value for Stanley Black Decker's organization. He is responsible for so many different things, which he will tell you about, but the inception of the company's accelerator, he sits on multiple startup advisory boards, and he serves as a board member to the state of Connecticut's Governor Workforce Council, as well as overseeing Stanley Black Decker's global philanthropy program, which is focused on closing the skilled trades gap. Michael, on the other hand, is CTO and co-founder of Inworld, which is a startup creating tools to build NPCs, which is non-player characters, all powered by generative AI. He's using AI to bring to life interactive characters whose personalities, thoughts, memories, and behaviors are designed to emulate social human interaction and changing the game, essentially, for the gaming experience. So please join me in welcoming Marty and Michael to the stage. Gentlemen, first off, congratulations to you both. Now that I've kind of given the corporate rundown of who you are and what you do, I would like to kind of flip it to you to do a little bit of an elevator pitch on how you describe yourself and your organization. So, Marty, let me throw it your way.
Thanks, Fred, and VentureFuel. I was really quite surprised and humbled to receive this award after I saw the competition being voted on. Congratulations to them, and hope to learn something from all of them going forward. Michael, congratulations to you and Inworld AI.
Thank you.
It's really impressive what you're doing. I'm VP of Business Development at Stanley Black Decker, and we're the 180-year-old global tool and storage leader. So by proxy, our tools build the world. We're quite proud of that. And you know us through DeWalt, Craftsman, and Stanley are big brands. I came into Stanley about 10 years ago through an acquisition. I was a president of a U.S. division of a global security company, and ran some businesses inside the company to include our global healthcare business, and learned a lot about innovation in that process. Today, I have responsibility for our global philanthropy program. We're growing the trades globally. I work on workforce development, and I also work supporting our CVC team on innovation and certainly connecting all types of innovation inside the company. So really glad to be here, Fred. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. And Michael, what about yourself?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for everyone's support and voting for our company. So I've been working on AI for over 10 years. So it's our second AI startup. Previous one was acquired by Google, and now it's a foundation for Google Cloud Contact Center AI, Google Cloud Dialogflow, and for certain Google Assistant functionality. So for the new startup, we are building, we tried to revolutionize games with new AI capabilities. So we want to introduce new types of games, new types of genres, and we want to enhance existing games. Because right now, I don't know, Fred, Marty, do you play video games?
Not too much.
Not much.
A little bit. A little bit.
For me, yeah, maybe I became a bit old, but now my reflexes are not so fast to beat other people and like excel in certain computer games. But what we found that many people, they want interactions. So they want to be friends with other virtual characters. They want to learn certain social skills and so on. So our platform allows to make these virtual characters alive. And basically, if you watched Free Guy movie, in multiplayer games, players want to be heroes. They don't want to be these ambient stuff. And what we want to do is basically make these worlds alive, very realistic, and yet every player can be a hero. So
I love it. And I think both of you referenced one of the coolest parts about the sort of venture and visionary of the year is, there's a group that makes it to sort of the final consideration that are all world-class innovators in their own rights. And then we kind of open it up, American Idol style, to go old school, right? With, who your peers vote on. And so we literally have a live voting that goes down. And so I think what's really interesting here is that not only do we recognize what you all are building, but that the other folks that are in your space and around your space are recognizing that you're a driving force for transformative change. So I always think that's the coolest part about that. And I'm curious for you all. I mean, in many ways, you've dedicated your careers to innovation in different aspects here. Curious what drew you to that as a way to pursue your career. And Marty, maybe I'll start with you, and then Michael, turn to you.
Sure. First of all, I'd like to thank my peers for having confidence in me to vote for me, but I'm really a manifestation of working with them and through them and having a great, successful interaction and relationship. So I appreciate that. For me, innovation was in our house started early. My father had come to decide he didn't want to be in the corporate world and started 3 businesses. So he had 4 kids under 10 years old and quit the big job and started 3 businesses. Now, those were sequential. The first one failed. The second one failed. I remember the third one, and it was hard, kind of challenging times, although we ate well. Those were challenging days where, to get through it all, my parents would translate technical books from French to English and Spanish to English. My father would type and my father would translate, my mother would type, and who would have thought that their language skills would help them get through the founder journey, but they did, and things went well, and it's a good story. My siblings also, I would say, really helped me because I come from a family of scientists and engineers. My twin sister Louise was a mechanical engineer before there was a lot of girls in that category. I've got a brother who's a incredible programmer. My brother Pierre, my brother Gordy's got a PhD in molecular biology and a postdoc in biochemistry. He's a hardcore scientist. But what I learned in my house was curiosity was really nourished and knowledge was really valued. So we really, to this day, really are inquisitive and try to see new things and talk about what's possible and make what's possible into something probable. So my environment growing up probably informed me more than anything about this, where I am today.
That's very cool. Michael, what about you? I mean, it seems like 10 years in AI, it's a long time in that space. Were you always entrepreneurial growing up, or what drew you to this world?
So all happened kind of organically. So like again, being a kid, so I wanted to invent something. I wanted to build a new car, invent like 128-bit processor, like write best video game, and so on. So like all my life, I was trying to invent something, but for a long time, because I was in Siberia, so it's the middle of nowhere, everything I come up with, it's actually someone invented this already several years ago. And this was for a while until internet like came into our area and became fast enough, good enough. So we got connected with the rest of the world. And that's when I got a chance to work at Silicon Valley startup and start working on AI and like breakthrough technologies. So that's just happened organically. And for entrepreneurship, I always want to improve something, but I think my friends and my co-founder Ilya, so he has a much higher entrepreneurship spirit. So his ideas, my implementation. So I think it's true for many startups. So it's very hard today to do something alone, but together with friends, with a team, you can achieve a lot. And it was a collective effort to do this.
Yeah, I love it. It's so interesting to see how it sort of nourished at an early age, right, for both of you, and not that it was a straight path from there, right, but that sort of seeds of where you are now were being planted then. Kind of switching to the sort of corporate startup collaboration world. Marty, I joked, you were on our podcast earlier this year, and I said I would put you on the Mount Rushmore of corporate innovators, which appears that's what this is. So I had predicted it ahead of time, but you have a front row seat to sort of how large enterprises are working with startups. And I'm curious from your vantage point, how is this, are there significant shifts in how that relationship is evolving?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough environment right now. It's there's a lack of free money, and the founders are really who've made it this far through this past few years, COVID and the reset, are feeling a bit pounded, right? So people are really stressed out. So the external environment is really tough. Michael said something about collaboration. I think the founder, if they're good, they're going to be the ultimate collaborator, because they have to work with, when you start with one or two people, you need to work with the world to figure out who are you going to hire, who are you going to do a pilot with, how are you going to develop code, who are you going to outsource to, so you've really got to understand that to get anything done, you need to work through other people. This is a problem in a big organization, because most large organizations their highest value is perpetuity. So people manage efficiency, right? They just try and perfect a transaction, either lower cost, higher speed, or both. When you work with startups, you're actually looking to disrupt some moment inside of the organization. And in doing this, it's really hard because it's really threatening to the organization. So There are certain ways to do this better than others, and we can speak to those. But I think the disruption of the last few years has been rough. And I was in a board meeting I've been in two in the last 2 weeks. One was in Silicon Valley, one was in Zurich, Switzerland. And, the founders are going through it's the same conversations, right? It's where's the funding coming from? Is the organization changing? What's the investment hypothesis? You need to have a lot of grit to get through this time. It's resetting. It hasn't changed yet. But I think corporates need startups. I don't think a lot of corporates know how to work with startups and be successful with them. So a lot of the legacy programs and strategies are being reconsidered.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I do want to double click back into best practices there and that both of you have seen. But Michael, I would say one thing that's very unique about Inworld, right, is we're talking about some of the challenges in the market, the reset. Similarly, in that same time of all that volatility, you all have had tremendous success, right? Raising $50 million recently, right, at a $500 million plus valuation. And I know we met first going through the Comcast NBC Universal Lift Labs Generative AI Accelerator. And so curious from your perspective, one, like how are you navigating this challenging marketplace? And then two, how are you seeing that corporate startup collaboration evolving?
Okay, for navigation, I think what's good about us, we were seeing trends before anyone else. So we started working on generative AI, started working on this stuff before there was any buzz. So like very few people there were knowing about it. So for example, when we started our startup, there was a very common like perception that AI is like still stupid, not usable, unsafe, expensive, and so on. And nobody saw that actually past few years, AI was making huge improvements. And like with COVID, these improvements are not linear, they're exponential. And what, for example, was a year ago, now it's 10x better. So, and that understanding of technology, of market, and so on, helped us always be ahead of time. And when everyone else is realizing, we are getting a lot of interest from investors and so on, willing to invest, and a lot of interest from clients willing to partner. So that kind of I think just some understanding of technology and market ahead of everyone else.
Well, Michael, let me kind of merge what Marty said into that because I certainly understand it from an investment standpoint, right? The VCs are trying to look 5-10 years out to make their bets, and so if you can see out that far or spot opportunities there, that makes immediate sense because they're primed for that type of conversation. Whereas clients and large enterprises may see like you're disrupting something, right? They're thinking of AI as slow, expensive. They've done it a certain way. It's set. They've already budgeted for the certain way. And you're coming in and saying, no. The technology is changing. You need to come along for this ride. How are you positioning that conversation when maybe they don't understand the technology leap you see and or are frightened by it?
Okay, so first of all, many corporations right now have some R&D like experiment labs organizations, and these parts, they seeing these trends and they're willing to collaborate with us. Second, we don't want to disrupt. We want to improve. We want to expand. So it's a win-win game. So for example, like voice actors. So we don't want them to lose their job. But for example, if people want to interact with virtual characters, there is no voice actor who can interact with millions of people simultaneously. So our goal there is a lot of space for creativity on one side, on the other side, we make these interactive experiences much more engaging and interesting than before. So like our goal is finding like things which be beneficial for all of us. So not just for us, not just for you. We're not going to kill any of this business. Vice versa, we can make their businesses much bigger and much like engaging. So if you take a look retrospectively, many great companies died because they haven't seen these technological shifts. And I think right now, many companies became smarter and they try to avoid the same fate as their competitors in the past. So that helps us a lot.
Marty, kind of playing off of that, when you think about it at Stanley or just in general, how does that vibe, right? Like I certainly think the idea of win-win, right? Like we're going to improve it, we're going to expand. There's the sort of growth side versus the disruption insurance side, right? Like we don't want to be disrupted, so let's look at what's next. How do you strike that balance of sort of carrot and stick when thinking about instigating change?
I think in some ways you have to compete against yourself in certain ring-fenced areas of the company and try and figure out how to scale something internally. I think Michael's got a really valuable offering. But many offerings, the hardest thing to do with new technology, new innovation is to deal with legacy. If you have to deal with clean sheet, go forward, the implementation is really easier. But when you have to solve for legacy and put automation into a manual process or consolidation, it's really, really hard because you have to solve for a significant amount of more variables to include more humans. And so I think a lot of founders come in with great ideas and great change, and they're kind of independent of the moment. And the moment is the 180-year legacy of the company. How do you bring it forward? And how do you fit it in the right place to move forward? And I think this is where so many people get caught in pilot purgatory because, it works fine. It works well. I was talking to somebody who runs innovation at one of the top software companies in the world. And we were talking about this moment of integrating all these software bundlings into their offering. It's really hard. I mean, they do it, but then, I say the hardest mile of innovation is the last mile, which is commercialization. And I don't think people understand how hard it is to solve for not just legacy companies, but legacy markets. And we're seeing that with the EV car adoption now, where we're trying to we're running into problems with legacy markets that are too big and hairy to really get this adoption faster, right? For a lot of reasons.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's so interesting. And the legacy markets piece, we've certainly seen it on VentureFuel side. Like our whole business is, how do we commercialize innovation? That's all we think about because the pilot purgatory is real. And we don't want it to be the startup petting zoo of let's go see some startups and then go back to our day job. But even when you have companies that want to push forward and try new things, they're often selling into the legacy markets where their buyers or their constituents are not necessarily looking for new and different. And so it's a really interesting part of that journey is to think not only for the last mile for the enterprise, but for whoever they're selling to, and how do you break down those silos is very interesting.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it is. It is. So Michael, 2021, you're the AI lead at Google. How did you spot the opportunity for Inworld? And was there anything you were learning on the Google side that influenced that? And what was that leap like, right? To go from the big company back to a startup?
Okay, it's like any catastrophe. It's a combination of multiple errors Here, it was the same, a combination of multiple factors at the same time. So 2020, 2021 was a COVID year of, it's a pandemic. Everything is locked in, at least here in California. And what do you do? So we cannot even go to park for hiking. We need to book in advance. So restaurants closed, everything is closed. So what do? You play video games, and like you start playing video games and you find like what's missing. So second part was like you don't. So we seen friends much less often. We had very few interactions with other people. And again, you start feeling this need, and you do not find this need in computer games or anywhere. And third part was at Google. Their generative AI models were improving every year. So it started with Mina paper, then Mina 2, then Lambda. And I had access to all these technologies. I saw progress. But unfortunately, back then, Google AI safety team, they were not allowing this kind of stuff externally. So it was till ChatGPT was released, it was not allowed to release any generative AI products or features into the wild. And for us, it was like a puzzle. Okay, we have computer games, they lack in certain features, and then on other sides there is an emerging technology which can fulfill this. So let's create, let's solve this problem. So that kind of was naturally. And then why we like this idea is it's not just about computer games. We choose computer games because if AI fails, if something doesn't work, nobody dies. Like it's happening with autonomous vehicles or
Thank
I
you.
know in
Yeah.
insurance, banking, and so on. So people can lose a lot of money and so on. But in a game, it's maybe just fun, part of the process. But over time, technology improves, and I think many of our existing activities can be represented as a game. So education. So right now, kids love playing video games. And during homeschooling in COVID years, I saw how hard to be a homeschooling parent, and that YouTube videos like these non-interactive materials, they do not work. Without our intervention, kids are not interested. They always wanted to play Minecraft and so on. So that's why I think it's our responsibility to provide them learning tools which are as interesting and even maybe more interesting than playing Minecraft and other video games. And then also, I hope like in 5-10 years, we'll see robots on the streets. And first years, they will be expensive, available to very few people. But for example, our technology will have opportunity to interact with millions, billions of people. And it will be much easier to incorporate it into real robots. Because in computer games, these characters need to navigate in very different situations, in very different environments with very different people. So if we can build a technology which allows to do that, we can transfer it there. And plus, there are a lot of social games. So job interview, it's kind of a game. So for both parts, or like dating, or so these are all games, and we can make trainings. We can gamify all these processes, so people will learn transferable skills, not only for virtual games, but also in real life. And that's why this idea was kind of very natural for us. And so far, we are moving towards that direction.
It's only a good game if you win, Michael.
That's how Marty plays.
We can make it.
Yeah.
You can always increase difficulty level.
Right.
I think, one of the things you said about robots being on the street, I maybe my most Silicon Valley, San Francisco moment was pre-pandemic. We took a bunch of executives to see some autonomous robot companies, and we took this group of like 10 executives for a walk with a robot around a block in San Francisco. And so there's this pack following the robot, and coming the other way is a woman walking her dog, and the robot stopped, moved away from her, and she was mad at the group of executives, not the robot. Like, she didn't even blink that there was a robot just rolling by. And I think, what's interesting about what you said is, as this evolves, right, people like things that they can talk to and interact with. I think one of the reasons generative AI jumped, right, and became such a big deal was not only could you search like you could with Google, but you could ask the follow-up question. And you could say, well, say it in my voice, say it funnier, say it like this, right? And there was that interactivity that people crave. So I think it's a really powerful thing about what you're doing. And this idea of taking teaching or at-home schooling and making it as fun as, playing Roblox or what have you, it might be a big unlock for the educational system. I think it's really interesting. So for the audience, please start dropping questions wherever you are watching this. We want this to be interactive. We want to have your questions answered. So if you have anything for Marty or Michael, please drop them into the chat, and we'll filter them in as we kind of dive more here. I wanted to ask you, one thing on what you said too, Michael, was the obstacle, right? You're talking about, there are these obstacles like COVID, we're not being there. It's often that the obstacle is the opportunity, right? And that takes that inventor mindset of like, well, this is frustrating, this is annoying, how do I solve it? And so I want to go back, Marty, to thinking about a company like Stanley Black Decker, right? You mentioned almost 200 years old. There is legacy there that is incredible and should be embraced and nourished. And then there's also this need for fostering innovation and trying new things. What can other large organizations, enterprises learn from your approach and maybe some of the mistakes you've made as you've sort of fostered this innovation culture?
I'm going to answer your question a bit tangentially, not directly, Fred, but I think the challenge with working with big enterprises or big organizations is to understand how they're synchronized and how well they're synchronized and how that synchronization works, because every big entity has a multiple of interdependencies, some parallel and analog processes. And if you don't understand those, you're going to have trouble working with large companies, or you're going to have trouble working in large companies. So there's a whole moment to learn how this thing works. Well-organized companies are well synchronized. And synchronization in nature is a function of speed, how fast something can move without breaking. So you can see Tesla can build a factory in China in 10 months. That's a well-synchronized organization. I talked with somebody, I'll never forget, before COVID in New York City, and he said, Marty, it takes 4 months for us to get a contract through legal to do a pilot. And they were getting into a 3-month accelerator. And I said, this is crazy. Like, you have to figure this out. So I tell the founders they need to find people who understand how the organization works, or how the market works, even better. Because you have to live in that space and get things through that space with the shortest amount of time as possible. So where people get frustrated is where things get stuck, and where things are going to get stuck. But you need to find people who know how to get things through the pipe really quickly, because founders of startups will die working with big companies if they rely on them to go fast. And you have to pick companies, by the way, you have to pick companies or markets that can move fast. If you're working with legacy insurance on innovation, it may not move as fast as fintech, which may not move as fast as AI tech and Google, because they're set up to move faster.
Yeah.
So you've got to understand the speed of what highway you're jumping onto here.
It's really interesting. I'm going to send this back to both of you, but Michael, you first. Marty talked about understanding the system, right, internally, and the synchronization, and who's the person that can unstick it, and how do you get through with speed. As a founder, that would seem to be not only a daunting task for each and every organization, but obviously you want to sell to more than one organization. how would you advise other founders that are looking to work with big enterprises how to rapidly identify either markets or companies or champions within companies to move your product forward at the speed you need to as a founder?
Oh, I don't know. It's very difficult question. So maybe also I'm not a person in charge of finding clients.
Yeah.
So maybe so I will try briefly. So first of all, is try to connect to companies. Be open about your problem. Ask their advice. So very often we had a connection, and we need to unfold. Like, okay, they redirect us to another person, then they redirect to another person. You need to understand what are their motivation, what are their problems, and so on, and be creative how to solve. I don't know if you understand this company is not ready and so on, like try to go to another company. Do not spend time here, because what we observed, okay, they are not ready today, but maybe a year later they come back and say, oh, you remember we had a chat, now I see this cool tech and so on, let's do something. I don't know, it's a very unique, so for every business, for every problem, it's so unique, and that's what distinguishes like great founders, great people. They can see opportunities, they can spot problem, they can communicate it. So there is no universal advice.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Marty, how would you advise someone to figure out that landscape quickly? If you were advising a founder, not specifically for Stanley, right? But like if they were going off to call whatever industry, have you seen anything that works or that you think is a smart approach?
I think you simply ask the person you're dealing with. Tell me about your last win inside the company. What'd you do? Who'd you work with? You'll figure out if they can't get you signed up as a vendor or get a check request through, they're not going to be able to, and they don't have to do everything, but they have to know how to get things done. So you ask them questions. What have you done inside this organization? In a soft way, right? You're trying to just learn through stories, but people will tell you if they're able to get things done or not. A lot of founders work with people who can't get things done inside their company. This is a real problem, right? So you've got to find those people, to Michael's point, and good founders will understand who they are. And it's typically a group of people. Yeah. You know, somebody says to me, I'm working with Walmart, and I say, who are you working with? And they'll say, I'm working with Fred. Well, there's 2 million people at Walmart.
Fred.
You need more than 2 million named Fred, but you need more than Fred, right? You need to understand how that thing works. It's hard. It's hard. And then while you're working with them, you know, people change jobs. They move over here. Like I'm not here anymore. I got a promotion, or it's a hard thing, because founders need godparents. They need people who help them and give them advice and point them and open the door, right? And if those people change, even if they're good, they get setback. It's a big setback.
Mm-hmm. What happened to us is to have angel investors and advisors from industry. So basically, they gave us a lot of introductions into these companies and advise us how to approach certain companies. So that might be a good strategy.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Marty.
I think Michael's got the right points. You know, if you don't have the right group or people or organization, move on to the next one. You know, sometimes brands are interesting. Oh, we're working with Google, but big company can kill you if you spend too much time and don't get results. You know that, Fred, right? You've seen that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like VentureFuel's 10 years old at this point, and we still struggle with this, right? Where both in a good way and a bad way. Right. I've had people reach out to me that I'd completely forgotten about at large organizations. It was like 2.5 years later, and they're like, "Hey, we're ready to go with what we talked about." I'm like, "What?" Like, we've moved so dramatically in 2.5 years, right. But that's not an unusual amount of time in corporate, right? And this person had to get the right budget cycle and the right, all the things. And so in some ways it could be lovely, but you can't wait 2.5 years for your first couple deals. And so I think part of it is asking questions. I often find founders are, I don't know if scared's the right word, but they just don't ask enough questions. They don't want to be annoying. And, is there budget for this? Is this a pain point? Who has to decide? In order to make this happen, what do we need to know?
And pardon me, Fred, if the person answering the question doesn't have the answer, you're dealing with the wrong person in the company.
You got it.
Right. And it's not that you don't want to take them out. You just got to make the circle bigger. You got to make the circle always bigger. You want an army of people working for you inside that company and knowing what you're doing and advocating for you in a meeting where you're not in the room, because a lot of times you're not in the room.
You nailed it. We always say internally, like, find your champion internally, and then don't rest on just that champion though too, right? Because they're going to rotate off of the business or the team or get another job or go do their own startup. And so you need to, once you get in, you get that person to spread you, and you've spread the best you can, maintaining them, which is interesting. So we already have questions starting to flow in. So I'm going to jump over to those in just a moment. My first question for you all is, you're both looking out into the future with different vantage points. Is there something that excites you, whether that is a technology, a change in the market, that you think maybe the general public is not attuned to yet or would be surprised to learn about? It's sort of the look out into 2034 and what's the thing that you think will be most interesting, different in the world. So Michael, I'm gonna put that to you first.
It's very hard to predict what will happen in 1 year time span, because some things may happen much faster than some we need to wait 5 years. Overall, I see already this year started with announcements and releases some very promising new AI models, architectures. People started to address different domains which were not possible with AI before. So I expect like this year will be even so. Like if last year was a race who will build the best foundational model, then this year it will be the race who will apply it to real world problems, because many foundational models, open source, they're already good enough to solve a lot of human problems we have right now. So
I love it. Marty, what about you?
I think healthcare is going to improve radically, physical healthcare. And I think that where healthcare is now delivered and managed through population sets, it'll be delivered through the stochastic event, which is the one person, right? And that one person will have a lot of insights with AI through what's going on with them physically. I think the challenge is going to be mentally. I think we're going to keep people alive longer, and I think at the end of the autumn of the lives, a lot of depression, loneliness, and mental illness. So I think we're going to have to figure that out, because there is a race to keep people here longer, and then there's a problem that more people here are lonely, depressed, and isolated, right? So I think technology has this kind of asymptotic moment where it solves more problems, but it doesn't change human nature. So there's got to be a moment where the human condition is actually addressed through the innovation in all of this, because if I tell you you're going to live to 130 years old, you may find that interesting, but when you're 115, you may not think so much.
Yeah, it's quality of life versus length of life in a lot of cases. And Michael, I'm gonna transition, because when you were talking about the next level of your technology, I actually went to healthcare. I said, "Oh boy, like this would be really cool." Because 50% of the time when you call a doctor, you really just want to ask a couple of questions, which the doctor doesn't have time for, right? And to them, they're like, "This isn't urgent." A well-trained version of your technology, obviously that would be probably the last place you would go just because of the risk, but maybe could address this from a medical standpoint, and then also the quality of life, the loneliness piece, having something you could talk to that is interactive and real. I mean, it seems like those are use cases that could be interesting.
So yeah, it's already happening. So we don't want to go healthcare. So it's a very regulated, and it will diverge a lot of our resources to compliance and so on. So we want to build great technology and product. But I believe there are many startups and even like Google, they already solving this simple question asking problem and trying to automate. For loneliness, you're right. A lot of our users, they may spend several hours a day interacting with virtual characters because something happened. They don't have this opportunity to interact with other people. So definitely their life is becoming better and they're sharing letters to our support that how technology changed their life. So it's already happening. And over time, technology will be better and better and acceptable for more people. So more people will get benefits of that.
I love it. All right, I've got two audience questions, both of which are awesome. The first one is for both of you. Are you an AI optimist or pessimist? Right? There's all sorts of regulation needed. There's all sorts of singularity discussions. And then obviously there's all the promising upsides we've talked about. Michael, where do you land on that spectrum?
I think you know the right answer from my previous responses. Yeah. Overall, I think if you take a look retrospectively, so when GPT-2 was released in 2019, you can read articles, what people were writing about this technology, how it's potentially dangerous and so on. Since then, 1,000 times smarter models were released, and we don't observe horrible things they were like describing. I believe people will always find ways to solve problems, whatever problem it is. So I haven't ever seen at certain point something becomes too bad. For sure, there will be enough amount of people who will address this problem. Sometimes just very small people amount of people are affected and not enough people. But if AI at any problem will become a problem, everyone will address this in the best possible way.
Interesting. Marty, what are your thoughts?
I think every one of these big pivots or big moments in technology transformation creates a dual outcome, which are good outcomes and bad outcomes. And it's the law of unintended consequences when you want to get people to get close to each other. So you start a social app and all of a sudden, people are killing each other online. I mean, or you set up cars to go fast and people die in accidents. I think our job is to really optimize the good things and ring fence, so to say, the bad things or the things that are the consequences that come with it, because anything that's powerful will have an impact that is not desirable. So we have to manage it and minimize it, but it'll be there. But I'm generally bullish on technology to improve, but I do think we need to watch the back door where the ugly stuff happens.
Yeah.
I don't know if right now you can ask people get rid of social network, get rid of internet. Nobody will. Like very few people, no, but most of us will tell it's much more good than bad. So
yeah, it's got both. Yeah, it's got both.
It does have both, right? And I think it depends on the time and the people you're talking to. And we saw an interesting startup that was using generative AI to tell news stories, to report the news, but changing the way they reported it based on the audience. So think social network, but for news. So you can imagine the echo chamber that creates. And it was very powerful and very good and very different. Same news event told to one group this way, told the other that way. And is that good? Is that bad? Gets people to watch news. You can sell more ads, but it creates the echo chamber. So I think with all this, there's always a push and pull, which is fascinating. And humans are the ones that can solve that kind of thing, hopefully. Back to the corporate piece. I love this question because of the way it was asked. It says, Marty, I would love your advice on looking for people who get things done in the corporate. And on the flip side, any advice for corporate leaders that are trying to figure out how to make their company culture more of a get things done culture?
I mean, this is all about people. and you have to find people who work through people. One of the greatest qualities, I mean, there's a lot of people who have authority in a company, can tell people what to do. But if you can find people who can influence without authority, you will find the right people. So I would look for that. And you have to trade on your reputation, your name, and you have to help people every day when you need nothing. I mean, when I ran companies, I used to always tell my commercial teams to call customers when there's nothing going on. Check in with them. Go when they're out of a buying cycle. Go build a relationship, see what's going on, sit with them, because when they're in a buying cycle, everyone's visiting them. When they're not, nobody's visiting them, and get to know them and see how you can help them. And when the buying cycle happens, you're probably going to be more trusted, because people are less trustful when there's money on the table. So I think you have to find people that generally can bring people together, can convene, and most people can do this if they try. Yeah. But reach out to people when you don't need anything, is the first piece of advice I give, because your network over time will be what drives your success. This is a planet of people. We've got a lot of technology, a lot of other things, but I think it's so damn important to help people. And one day you may need help, right? So they'll be there.
I remember very early in my career reaching out to somebody who had been let go from a very prestigious job, and I just said, "Hey, I don't know if I remember you lived in this area. I'm there. Do you want to grab a cup of coffee?" And I sat with this person, and they basically said, "Hey, I was the president of this company all day. Invites to games, invites to this, invites to this." He goes, "You're the first person to have reached out to me since I left to be like, hey, do you want to talk?" Everyone wanted to talk to me when I had the big cushy job.
Right.
And then he ended up getting another very big cushy job. Right. And it wasn't that I was calculating that. I genuinely liked this person and wanted to see how they were doing. But that influence without authority and or someone that talks not when they need something is a tremendous piece of advice. The second question in here that I think is very interesting, mostly because I didn't put these two things together, is it says, curious how if exterior influence can cause lasting change with a legacy brand like Stanley. And then they said, hard to think of an example of a pop culture social media trend more disruptive than the Stanley Cup. I had no idea. Is the Stanley Cup related to Stanley?
No.
No. Okay. There we go.
But we'll take it. I mean, we'll take it. It's actually not. And I'm a hockey fan, so I'm thinking of a different Stanley Cup, right? You're talking about the coffee cup.
No. I was thinking, well, maybe they're talking about the coffee cup. I'm thinking the hockey one.
No, that's Lord Stanley, who that's named after, and that cup's coming back to Boston in June after we win the Stanley Cup. I can.
Is that right? Is that right?
But I think it's an interesting question. And I think it speaks to, even though we don't have the coffee cup, this pop social thing, you constantly have to reinvent your connectivity to the customer and the end user to be relevant and be where they're at. Charlie Munger, who was Warren Buffett's sidekick, he always had a piece of advice when looking at problems or scenarios. He said, look at it backwards. He said, whatever you're looking at, just look at it backwards. And for this type of moment is how do we start from the customer back to us? Yeah. And I think that's critical to see how you operate as an organization and what kind of service you provide.
I have to say on your Stanley Cup comment, my 4-year-old is obsessed with the Golden Knights of Las Vegas for no reason other than they're Knights, but he is convinced they are going to win the Stanley Cup. So we'll have to talk about that another time.
Let me know when you want me to school him through Michael's AI.
Okay, great. That's the way to talk to him, probably. Michael, this is a really cool question. So it says, layering the human condition onto new technology. Curious to hear how you see humans interact with AI in newer, different ways, and how you envision that changing in the future.
I don't know. It's very hard to predict. Again, it's a human nature. Yeah. It's very different. So I expect maybe in future, we'll interact with AIs like with many other people, but like right now, for example, I was born somewhere and I had no experts in certain area. Now with AI, I can get expert in this area. I have problem to find a friend. Like I can find an AI who will become my friend, and it will not replace people. It will augment people and make our lives more interesting. And I don't know, so many people experience loneliness, and just even for us, our previous app, it was a much simpler technology assistant, and we got a message that my kid has autism, and thanks to your app, he started to talk and talk to other people. So before that, they were this kid was afraid to interact with other people, but after like daily interactions, they found like, oh, it doesn't hurt. I can. So it's very hard to predict, really. Future is will be like what we choose, but I believe it will be much more interesting than it's right now.
Love that. All right. So here's the last question I have for you. This is from Michael. It says, I imagine non-player characters were neglected in favor of core characters in storytelling previously. How did you prove your value proposition to the large corporates, your clients, that end consumers would actually want this level of interaction with the non-core or the non-player characters?
Over time, this quality of these interactions will be better and better. Again, right now, technology is not perfect. There are different hiccups and so on. But seeing how fast everything is improving, very soon it will be good enough. And for us, we don't want, for example, to integrate our technology to first-person shooters. It makes no sense. But there are so many other experiences where it will make perfect sense. And yeah, so we're right now building several showcases with big AAA gaming studios. So I think they will be a great example for everyone else to see how it can be in best possible way.
Yeah, I love it. All right, I lied. One more question, Marty. This one came in, and I love it. Is there a startup pilot that has wowed you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them. We've been working with a company, DGP, and out of Houston, who makes bio-based oils and lubricants. So as we electrify all of our DeWalt outdoor products, we now have a bio-based oil and lubricant that can really solve for those machines. And we're electrifying all of our machines with batteries. So it makes sense for us not to put in petroleum-based oils and lubricants. So DGP, Dynamic Green Products out of Houston, has been amazing. They're selling it now under the DeWalt brand in Lowe's and online and Amazon. So this is something that I've worked with Dan Fitzgerald and Mike Mayen inside the company for 5 years. And there's these pilots they keep bringing to us are in the market now because commercialization is now happening.
That's really cool. What, out of curiosity, how long did it take to get to, I'll call it $1, right? From the, hey, we identified this as something interesting.
2 to 3 years. 2 to 3
years.
years.
Okay.
2 to 3 years. And people don't understand how hard innovation is. Innovation is not creativity. Creativity is the ideas. Innovation is all the execution. And getting it done is really hard, and you have to think differently. And people will say to me, hey, you can't reinvent the wheel. And I said, the wheel's been reinvented for 10,000 years, and people are still working on the wheel. So we got to continue to work on things that don't seem obvious. So it's hard stuff.
I love it. Marty, Michael, this was a pleasure. It was so much fun. I would love to keep going, but I'll let you get back to your very exciting day jobs. But thank you both for your time, but also all that you're doing to drive and ignite change. The voters got it right. You're both incredibly dynamic, and really appreciate you and all that you're doing. So thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Fred.
you very much.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us.